Hey guys, my name is Albert Ellison III. I'm a screenwriter, producer, and award-winning director. I'm currently in production and on set of my first feature film, The Profession. In the description below the video, you can find a link to my free screenplay guide, which is an outline of the first 10 lessons in this course and every fundamental element to screenwriting. These are worksheets you can fill out as we discuss the topics, so you might be able to retain the information better. It's my gift to you, so submit your email and you'll find the package in your inbox. Get your hands on the worksheet before we proceed into this episode. Pick up any book on screenwriting and it will emphasize the importance of conflict. It's constantly stated that conflict drives the story and keeps the audience engaged. Conflict is what crafts the essential momentum of the film that will grab the audience and never let them go until the story is over. Today, I want to dive into what conflict actually is so that it can be more tangible, but I also want to take a deeper examination into the purpose of conflict itself. Let's begin by defining conflict. A difference that prevents agreement, disagreeing between ideas, feelings, etc. I want to break this down into a simpler definition. Conflict is a struggle between opposing forces. One character is trying to achieve something while the other is trying to prevent them from fulfilling their goal. In story, conflict is the series of trials and tribulations in front of the character. In most explorations, there are two forms of conflict, external and internal. External conflict, the obstacles the character faces in the material world. This has to do with the character's want, as we discussed in the Creating Characters video. This is the most simple and straightforward type of conflict, the one that the audience should instantly be able to recognize before the heart of story is really revealed to them. This is not what the story is ultimately about, but it stages the characters in positions where true meaning can be gleaned. It puts the pieces in place. In the film Everything Everywhere All at Once, the characters are immediately faced with the impounding pressure of the IRS as they have to sort out their disastrous tax situation. Paying taxes is not what the story is ultimately about, but it is the immediately recognizable external conflict which forces the characters into action and ignites the greater story. Internal conflict. Internal choices the character must make. It often has to do with relationships. Emotional baggage/ties they must overcome. In Everything Everywhere All at Once, Evelyn is trying to make everyone proud as a mother, daughter, and wife, but because of that, she is disappointing everyone. Her husband, father, and daughter all have different needs and expectations, and she is pulling herself thin trying to appease them all, so she's pleasing no one. Evelyn feels the pressure of being a disappointment to her father, so she is trying to decide if she made the right choice by marrying Waymond, and that is put under even heavier pressure when he proposes a divorce. Evelyn is put in a lot of internal conflict here, and over the course of the movie she has to make choices about the direction she will go with it. Conflict must be resolved. At face value, this is very straightforward. You may have watched a film where the problems are solved. The character is having trouble with winning over both his girl and his new job, but in the end he gets the job, fixes the relationship, and lives happily ever after. After it was over, you may have asked what the point of watching that movie was. The reason for that is because the film had nothing to say. We need to step back and think about constructing conflict as not simply internal and external, but we need to examine the purpose of conflict and review the meaning of story in the first place. Quote, "Story is metaphor for life, and to be alive is to be in seemingly perpetual conflict." Robert McKee from Story. As I established in the opening of this course, the meaning of storytelling is to provide guides on how to live life, to produce moral and philosophical debates that can either answer or ask questions about our own existence. Stories may entertain us and pass the time, but ultimately, stories exist to show us how to live and struggle through the deep questions of life. Characters are not in conflict simply because of external situations. People will not put themselves into trouble for the sake of. People put themselves into trouble because of what they believe. When values or beliefs conflict, action takes place, always. In The Anatomy of Story, John Truby writes, "Great storytelling isn't just conflict between characters. It's conflict between characters and their values." In most books I read, there are only definitions for internal and external conflicts, and from some authors, an emphasis on the moral and value-centric approach to the conflict. But in my course, I want to hardwire a third type of conflict that is actually the most important: the philosophical conflict. Philosophical conflict should be the very soul of your entire story. Every single decision should derive from it. Your external and internal conflicts are extensions of the philosophical conflict. When in an argument, you may have to take action on what you believe in, and that will produce external conflict. When what you believe creates roadblocks and problems relationally for you, that produces internal conflict. In our last two videos, we talked about the creation of characters and their role in storytelling. If you remember, they are the catalysts for the worldviews that fill out the philosophy of your story, and as I mentioned, you need opposing forces. Having these differing worldviews that fight it out will create depth and meaning in your story. Robert McKee once said that if he could say anything to the producers in the industry, it would be three simple words: meaning produces emotion. We discussed that understanding is the key to empathy. It's the same conversation. To avoid having an audience walk away from your screenplay or film with no impact, you need to create meaning with a strong philosophical conflict. You create this strong philosophical conflict by writing characters with opposing worldviews that can fight it out. Characters push each other and the audience deeper into the philosophical debate of the film. Philosophical conflict at the core of your story gives it meaning, and meaning produces emotion. For practice, take a set of characters from one of your pre-existing stories and lay out their beliefs. If you don't have a set of pre-existing characters of your own, then take a set of characters from a movie you like and begin outlining their beliefs. Try and narrow it down into two sides for this assignment. There should really only be two central opposing beliefs in your story. These two beliefs must be in direct opposition of each other because that will cause conflict and create a focused story. If you find a character who does not remotely associate with the same belief systems as the majority of your characters, consider whether they are a purposeful and needed addition to the story so they can be reworked or cut. Remember guys, you can get my free screenplay guide in the description below. Submit your email to receive that as we continue into this recap. The purpose of conflict. Conflict is made up of two opposing forces arguing and pushing back on one another. This is how we keep an audience engaged in our story. Without conflict, nothing is at stake and nothing interesting is happening in your story. Without a resolution to conflict, there is no victor, no better argument, no point to your story. There are three types of conflict: philosophical conflict, internal conflict, external conflict. External conflict: the obstacles the character faces in the material world. This is not the meaning of the film, but the pieces fall into place through external conflict for a moment of true interchange to happen, where the meaning of the story is gleaned. Internal conflict: the choices a character must make. It often has something to do with emotional or relational decisions. Philosophical conflict: the heart of story. You must create opposing forces within the philosophical conflict of your story, characters with differing beliefs. This is where the real stake of your story is, for this is the argument the audience needs to be resolved to glean meaning from the story. Characters must be placed into situations through the external conflict where they are tested and forced to resolve the philosophical conflict. During this entire process, they deal with their troubling internal conflict. The resolution of your philosophical conflict is the meaning of your story. Thank you all for listening to this episode. If you did find it helpful or informative in any way, please leave it a like. But if you thought it could have been better, leave it a thumbs down so that I know to do better next time. Next week, we'll dive into the process of how to practically create strong philosophical conflicts for yourself with some workflows I built for you. See you then.